Hi, and welcome to a new video for Aperture Speaks. This week's topic is creative gradients. Now, most people, when they think about gradients, especially in Photoshop, they just think of a very sort of simple adjustment. And this is maybe even just a color or just darkening or just darkening an area. And I just want to look at a few ways where you can actually have gradients being a little bit creative. Now, in doing this in Adobe Camera Raw, and I believe you have similar adjustment tools in Lightroom, so you can do similar things as well. So the first thing we have to do is this image hasn't been retouched, it's just the raw file which has been kicked out. And there's sort of a few things on this picture we're going to have a quick look at. Now, the first thing that people do with gradients is they just pull it down and they just darken the area. Because that's how they sort of know, that's how you know gradients work. You know, you just put it down and darken it, like with a neutral density gradient filter, which you put in front of your camera, which is really commonly used in Top Gear, if you ever watch Top Gear. And they darken the top and they add some colors and things like that. With this image, it does need a little bit of gradient on the top, a little bit of darkening there on the top. But I just want to have a look at a few other things that you can do with the gradient filter in Adobe Camera Raw, especially, and a little bit of creative. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing, just looking at the exposure going down. Now you have other settings here as well. You have contrast. So obviously adding contrast or reducing contrast. So in this case, if I reduce contrast, it's going to go a little bit dreamy in the background, a little bit softer there. Highlights, so adjusting the highlights within this area. So you can brighten them or just darken them. The shadows, once again, the same. Clarity, so this is like the mid-tone contrast area. Saturation, so you can raise the saturation, lower the saturation of that area. We also have three other slight adjustments. Sharpness, so adding extra sharpening to the gradient. Noise reduction, now this is quite important. If you make some quite heavy adjustments, you may actually pick up some noise. So in doing that, you can just knock back that noise a little bit. And moire reduction. This is these like banding you sometimes see when you have created a gradient. And I'll just see if I can just create some banding now. I think I just have there. So if I'm trying to zoom into this area, I can't see where it was. Nope. I thought I saw it, but I hadn't. Or maybe a little bit. Maybe I can see it more on this. There's a little bit of banding going on here. So moire reduction. If I go into my tool, click on that again, you can sort of reduce it, or make it more evident. So, and the last bit here is color. And this enables you to add color to the filter. So you can actually create a gradient color filter at the same time as well. So maybe you want a bit more blue. Adjust the saturation. Maybe one more cyan or blue. Something like that. And this can just add to the image. So this particular image, there's a few things which I would actually do. So first of all, I would have a gradient at the top and a gradient at the bottom. Okay. But before I go there, I'm actually going to do some home adjustments here, just a quick little bit, just to get the image the way that I like. I want to have it before I add the gradients. The gradient is not the first thing I do to the image. I would actually do my basic adjustments first. And this is because I want to just make sure I get the best of the base before I start adding like basically layers onto the top. So before we just pay it down a little bit. I got to arc a little bit there, so that's standing out. This is going to be quite a... I'm actually going to leave vibrance to the end for a minute. I think it was a daylight, so it's going to be a little bit blue, but a little bit more warmth into that bit there. Okay. Okay, it's my default noise reduction. So this is just my basic sort of workflow, and really I'm just trying to get as much as I can fix before we sort of start. So there we go. Is the horizon straight? And this one, I think that's a hill as well, so it's not going to be too much of a. Let's have a quick look. Straighter, but I want the crop like normal. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the gradients. The gradients does work very similar to the adjustment brush, which you may have used before. So in this particular one, the first thing I want to do is actually darken the sky. Now, the gradient starts wherever this green part, wherever the green part here is. So if you just lower that down, we can watch this now. So the gradient is going down and up. So wherever I have that, that's where the gradient will start, and the red is where the gradient will end. Now what this means is, if you want to have a smooth gradient, you need a longer distance between the start and the finish. For a much smaller gradient, you need a smaller distance. But that can look a little bit unnatural because the space for the transition is smaller. So let's click back in here again. So you want to have a sort of naturalish gradient. What I would sometimes do is place this here and have this extend a little bit further down, and that looks okay. So once you click on here, I've obviously just first thing I did was just drop that down. So now I'm just going to make the adjustment a little bit more finesse. So I don't want it too dark, just dark enough. A little bit of contrast in there maybe. Highlights, is there anything? So there is a little bit of highlight in there. Just make it a little bit more natural maybe. Of course this will all increase a bit of contrast in there, a bit of clarity. Okay, now here's the next bit. You can increase the saturation. Now if I do this, you can actually see there's actually a little bit of blue in the sky, and actually most of this is just a cloud. It was quite an overcast day, and so what I'm going to do here is actually add the color in at this point, at the bottom. Just adding a little bit. Maybe I didn't quite have the right hue there. It's on the purple side. There we go. Okay. So obviously that looks a little bit strange because that's actually quite a nice bit of color to it compared to the rest of the image. So this is where I'm going to actually have my next adjustment. So I'm actually going to click New. Now whenever you do a new adjustment, it automatically remembers the other adjustment you have just made. So what you can do here is, like me, set a preset to 0. Now first of all, I'm going to have an adjustment looking at just a little bit of contrast a little bit of sharpening in here. So I want to just improve this mid-tone contrast area here. And also just sharpen it a little bit. Now if you look at sharpening, you can also reduce the sharpening as well. So create quite like a soft focus effect. And increasing this up here, you can add a little bit extra sharpness into that bit there. Now I'm going to manipulate this bit a little bit. I'm going to increase the highlights. There's a little bit of highlight in this area. So increase the highlights. Lower the shadows down. And now what I can do is I can now just pull this up. A little bit of a shallower adjustment. I'm also going to brighten the area by raising the contrast there. Letting the exposure. Increase the contrast. Saturation. Now once again, this is like on quite a bit of it was actually an overcast day, so if you were to manage the auto, it automatically went to daylight. in the earlier adjustment. So here I'm just gonna, if you add too much, you go a bit colder, but just a little bit. That is literally just a touch, because you can see the point where that's now too far. 15's too far. 9. That's there. Okay, just improving that just a little bit. There. A bit more brightness. Oh. Okay. And if we wanted to, we could also add a color in as well. If you wanted to add a blue. Really, really light blue though. Yeah. And so we can click preview. And there we go. So the image now just has a little bit more color to it before. Before it was a little bit lacking in color. And there's a little bit off on the balance there as well. Now obviously what you could do now is you can actually just put in a new one, again, over the top, just for contrast. If you just wanted to increase the contrast completely, just affecting the sort of gradient bit here. You could have another one just coming down. You can layer these one on top of another. Take this out. Just darkening that a little bit more. Adding a little bit more to it. And just sort of building with these things. And also then you can obviously do the next bit thing, which would be your other adjustments. So now I'm going to quickly do. And now what I'm going to do is just go back to my normal adjustments again, and I'm just going to add a medium contrast, or maybe strong contrast in here. And the only thing I'll probably do is that blue is actually quite strong, so I have to find out which one is actually the blue one. I think it's this one now. This one here. And just reduce the saturation of the blue just a little bit. There we are. And that's the other great thing about these gradient adjustments here, is that you can go back to them in your raw file and make the adjustments again and again and again. So here's the final image, really. There's a few little bits of housekeeping I need to do, mainly to clean up the sky a little bit. There's a few little marks there, and just sharpen it. And I'll probably just reduce the darkness in the tree a little bit as well. It does look a little bit too dark there. So in Photoshop, I'll just create a dodge and burn layer and just sort of fix that a little bit more carefully than I can do with this adjustment brush here. It needs to go quite a lot brighter. And here I'm afraid I'm going to take out the background. So that's really it. Using the gradients, I think it's a brilliant way, not just to use it in the box standard way, but to think creatively about how you can use the gradients and what can you get out of the gradients. Even changing the temperature or something, desaturating something as well, reducing the saturation, boosting the saturation, just to sort of pull out the best parts of the image. This image could have been a lost image. The first edit of it I did went actually to black and white, and it looked pretty good because it was already sort of monotone to begin with. Here I really injected a little bit of color into it, which does give it a nice sort of feel, but I have an alternative version of the image as well. So that's it. You can catch me on my blog. My blog is aperture64.wordpress.com. You can catch me on Twitter at Aperture64, and I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/Aperture64. Remember to type that out, not just use the 64-bit. Until next week, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.